May I invite you members to join me in our opening prayer. Almighty God, the source of knowledge and understanding, guide the minds of those of us who are about to take counsel together on matters concerning this county, that in our debate and in our decisions, we may faithfully discharge our duties of office and promote the health, safety and well-being of those we seek to serve. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen. Fellow councillors, officers and members of the public, who are watching, welcome to our council meeting this evening. This is our third council meeting in the museum, but as you will see, we have a different layout tonight, which hopefully members will prefer and which will be more conducive to debate. Before we get to the agenda proper, there are some general housekeeping rules to share. Firstly, as the restrictions have not been fully lifted, I would like to remind members of the committee to please keep their masks on while moving around the building. As we now have screens between us, we may remove our masks while seated. Hopefully, speaking without masks will help everybody to hear the presentations more clearly, as we are still relying on the one central microphone. Governance staff will help to administer the meeting by taking the votes. And as usual, I will get close, if I get close to 9:30 and it is clear that the business has not been concluded, then I will propose from the chair an extension of 30 minutes until 10 p.m. So could I have apologies, please?
We've received apologies from Councillor Burrows, Councillor Waller and Councillor Walters, Chair.
Thank you. Chairman's announcements, they have been circulated prior to the meeting, but also could we wish Hamish Watson for his selection to the British Lions all the very best and congratulations to him. He is an old Okanian, so it's really nice. And on a personal note, can I thank Nick Woodley for all his contribution to the council over the last 2 years. Announcements from the leader, members of the cabinet and or the head of paid services. I've been advised that there are none. Declarations of interest. Do we have any?
Chairman, not remain seated yet. I'm a member on Oakham Town Council, and there's a certain element in item 10 which refers to savings where Oakham Town Council can be approached. I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm going to stay and listen, and I'm not really going to debate. I will save any comments from the Town Council. I would just make the observation that I think it's an excellent paper there. Thank you.
Anybody else? No. Minutes of the previous meeting. To confirm the minutes of the meetings of Rutland Camp Council held on the 8th of March, 22nd of March, 10th of May and 7th of June. Can I have a proposer and seconder? Thank you. All in agreement? Thank you. Petitions, deputations and questions from members of the public? We don't have any. Questions from members of the council? To receive any questions submitted. We have had 5 questions for tonight and these have been circulated in advance for all members. I will take questions in the order in which they were received. And where a councillor has 2 different questions, the second question will come after the first question. The second question will come after the first questions have been dealt with. So you don't come on in order, you jump back one. We have 30 minutes for this agenda item. If we don't get through all questions and answers, written answers will be supplied and these will be included in the minutes. Our first question on live and local has been received from Councillor Waller and of course Councillor Stevenson as portfolio holder of culture. As Councillor Waller cannot be here with us this evening, I will ask Sue to read out the question and then Councillor Stevenson will respond.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I've got a correction to that. Councillor McCartney is going to put Councillor Waller's question and we'll proceed from that.
Thank you.
I'm glad you circulated this as well because I haven't seen it. Councillor Stevenson.
Hello, Councillor McCartney.
Live and Local, when it is fully operational, provides much needed social contact in our villages and mitigates against social isolation and low-level mental health problems. It also provides an income generation opportunity for our village halls through raffles and sale of refreshments, for example, which in turn keeps our village halls open for further social interaction opportunities. RCC currently subsidises Live and Local to the tune of £2,500 annually. The remainder of the income they need to operate coming from ticket sales and fundraising activities. At our scrutiny committee meeting to discuss the budget savings, I asked if this saving could be delayed until the next financial year in order for the parishes to have the opportunity to replace RCC's subsidy with a subsidy through the parish precept. Councillor Stevenson declined my request, instead indicating that she would negotiate replacing RCC's grant with one from the Arts Council and to talk to parishes about this proposed withdrawal. I would therefore like to ask, what was the outcome of Councillor Stevenson's discussions with the Arts Council? What was the outcome of Councillor Stevenson's discussion with the parishes? And if Live and Local cannot continue in Rutland because of this reduction in their income, what additional low-level mental health support will RCC be putting in place to fill the need?
Thank you very much, Councillor McCartney. I would like to thank Councillor Waller for her question. It touches upon pertinent topics: culture and arts provision within the county, mental health, rural isolation, and fundraising opportunities for individual parish councils. All these against the backdrop of a decreasing authority budget and one with an agreed need to balance the books, which does not rely upon reserves to do so. It is also pertinent that our Cabinet report tonight includes the budget paper, how we spend the public's money, including key underlying principles. The portfolio holder has made clear in scrutiny meetings that simply putting off these changes for another year is not the best course of action. This needs to be consistent across the budget areas, regardless of the sums involved. The authority and community need to evolve now for the greater good of all going forward. To add to Councillor Waller's most helpful background to the Live and Local events within the county, between 2015 and 2021, there have been 59 shows over 9 villages and 1 town. This equates to roughly 9 shows a year, 1 show per village per year. There is sufficient budget to deliver the planned programme up until September 21, with the additional ability to deliver a further 2 shows between September 21 and May 22. When the draft proposals for the budget came to scrutiny in April, I committed to arrange a meeting with the Arts Council England to explore the possibility of the match funding to come from the parishes rather than RCC. Members should note that Arts Council England works on the principle of only match funding, a model that has many benefits in terms of promoting the value of the arts by authorities, but one that places rural communities such as Rutland at a disadvantage. I will not repeat the points regarding our funding formula and the impact this has on our non-statutory services as compared to our urban counterparts. In June, the Head of Service and I met with Arts Council England to discuss the proposal that the origin of the match funding should not be an issue. If our parishes can provide the funds, Art Council for England will fund. In real terms, this equates to each of the 9 parishes and 1 town providing £250 per show. The Arts Council England representatives were amenable to this proposal, but needed to confer with colleagues regarding the direction of travel and to liaise with Live and Local. We are waiting for a response from them on the outcome of this. Their next port of call was discussing with their wider team. Clearly, liaison with parishes needs to be done with the full facts, including a formal response from Arts Council England. However, I believe the 9 parish councils and 1 town council affected are fully aware of the situation, subject to agreement at full council this evening regarding the Cabinet recommendations for the in-year savings proposed tonight, and so presumably will have been proactive in considering alternative methods of raising the £250 required. I will welcome an item on the parish forum agenda to discuss next steps and await to hear from those who set the agenda with regard to this. In terms of the mental health, we all clearly have mental health, which will work on a continuum throughout our lives, just in the same way that we all have physical health. Living in a community that enables good mental health for all has to be of key importance. The key here, though, is not to look at one item in isolation. have to be holistic in our approach. Principles clear, with an understanding that all of us, both individually and collectively, contribute to delivering the ambition of good mental health for all. This does not lie solely at the feet of the authority. Rather, like safeguarding, mental health is everyone's business. So in terms of filling the 9 shows a year void, as members are aware, the future Rutland Conversation outputs are soon to be played back to the community. From this, our council will have a clear idea of what is important to our community, a community vision result upon which RCC can build its corporate plan, ensuring that the authority plays its part in delivering this vision. This vision will also play an integral role in shaping our baseline principles for our refreshed cultural strategy, work on which will be starting in the autumn. Therefore, I would wish to reassure Councillor Waller and colleagues that what feels uncomfortable today and requires individual parishes to determine the extent to which they value their annual show, we are at the start of developing an exciting future, one in which the community of Rutland works together to create a county that offers much to all.
Have we got a supplementary?
I don't think I do, no. I'm happy. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is the first of 2 from Councillor Brown. Who's that? Sorry.
It appears that the funding for the Armed Forces Covenant of £30,000 has been withdrawn. Rutland County Council would now be footing the bill from the COVID-19 grant. Is this proper use of that grant? And if so, exactly what we will be getting for the £30,000? And does it represent value for money when we're cutting back on so many services which affect the whole community? Should we be spending this amount on a section of the community by virtue of their job?
Thank you. Councillor Rosell is answering this.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Budget report does identify £30,000 from COVID grants fund to pay for the Armed Forces officer who's been directed to COVID response duties. It's an appropriate use of funding as they've been utilised to assist with the shielding programme, volunteer mobilisation, vaccination centre duties, and coordinating and being present at the testing centre. The Armed Forces grant was withdrawn and council were asked in the 21-22 budget whether they wish to fund the pressures caused by the withdrawal of grant. At the time, there was unanimous agreement to fund the pressures in recognition that the work of this officer is valued and extends beyond the Armed Forces community. Members may wish to revisit this as with any area of service in future. Mr. Chairman, colleagues, residents of Rutland and members of the Armed Forces community who may be listening online tonight. Councillor Andrew Brown sought clarity in the initial part of his question, which I believe has now been provided. Thereafter, he asks if the sum represents value for money and should we be spending it on a section of the community by virtue of their job. Mr. Chairman, if I may, councillors often share wisdom with us, and so on this occasion, I thought it might be helpful if I impart a modicum of my lived experience and understanding on military service, the service community, the Armed Forces Covenant, which is currently progressing through government to be enshrined in law, and the opportunities for us as a council to continue to apply for Armed Forces Covenant funding, which we've already been successful in, to help support our community. It is, of course, true to say that those who serve do so with a very clear understanding of selfless commitment, perhaps referred to as their job. Foregoing societal norms and being ready often at just a few hours' notice to deploy globally or nationally, this element of society do so out of a sense of duty made through personal choice. Often with family left in isolated locations, they train, deploy, redeploy, train again, and in between respond to calls from central and local government to provide military aid to the civil authorities. COVID-19 refers. The majority will forfeit annual leave plans due to rapid deployment. They have no set hours of working, and they spend weeks, months, years away from society and loved ones in support of the nation, local authorities, and our community. Over time, and as part of their job, they will be asked to deliver solutions and capability far beyond their usual skills and competencies, which might include disaster relief, culling livestock during national outbreaks of foot and mouth, performing life-saving interventions in response to national ambulance strikes, become overnight firefighters, drive petrol tankers, and respond in extraordinary numbers to national and international pandemic. All of this in addition to what some might call their job. Some might also suggest that they become the nation's fourth emergency service, but on demand and on every occasion they step up and do their job. Critically though, they do not expect favour, charity or advantage. Routinely they ask for nothing of society, but in doing their job and anything else that is thrown at them, they become isolated from societal awareness, knowledge and wisdom, and at a point during later life or crisis on the home front when serving, they stumble and become the very thing their pride and fortitude struggles most with. Over the past years, Rutland has watched with pride as our Armed Forces officer has restored faith in service provision, prevented countless numbers of service families and veterans from becoming looked after, and delivered low-cost, sustainable support for members of the armed forces in our community who are now retired. Simply, this investment in our armed forces family represents proactive solutions to families and individuals who have not grown up in usual society, because in our ask of them doing their job, we've created gaps in awareness, knowledge and wisdom that then requires help in the future. From the families of those who've lost loved ones in operations, to the service mum who, following divorce, needs help with housing and education for her family, to the retired Royal Army Veterinary Corps soldier who needs support in accessing adult education, to the retired Special Forces operative who needs a blue badge, and to the BAME service personnel who need help with access to healthcare, we have a moral duty under the Armed Forces Covenant, which we have signed, to ensure that none of the service community experience disadvantage. Since signing the Armed Forces Covenant, Rutland has benefited from Covenant funding to expand our community, saving central resource, but the value of that funding has also flowed back across the community as veterans, service personnel, cadets, reservists and service families have become an enduring element of our society. In sports clubs, social enterprise, volunteer organisations, health, education and housing, our service community can continue to thrive, give freely of their time and add value to the community. It was ever thus, and as we look to the future, might we take this opportunity to reaffirm our bond with those who serve, their families and our military community, and underpin our signature of the Armed Forces Covenant with a continued commitment to those doing their job and equally those who did the job. Occasionally, they will need our support. I would, of course, be happy to take further questions.
Your supplementary.
Thank you, Councillor Zelf, for that very comprehensive answer. With the number of armed forces personnel will be presumably going down, will the covenant be reviewed, or will the amount of money we need go down, do you think? And will the officer be doing any armed forces work, or is it entirely COVID related at the minute?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. What I can report to Council is that in year 18-19 we spent £34,000. In year 19-20, 40.6. 2021, 37.1. 21-22, 30,000 plus £15,000 from Market Harborough. There are currently 2.4 million veterans in the UK. Of that, you can then add almost double that to increase to the whole service family. As the military go through defence cost studies and reviews, it is likely that our service population will reduce. But in real terms, the reduction in population will take many years, decades, before we reach a point where we could consider reducing the amount of money we spend on our veterans and service families.
Thank you. Councillor Power, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, would it be in order for me to take my questions in reverse order? In case we
Can
run
take
out of
your
time.
question, yes, you can
Yeah,
choose. it
thank
first.
you. So I'll take my second question. Thank you. This is to Councillor Hensley. The budget outturn report at item 10, reference 66, 2021, paragraph 323, states there's been savings of £978,000 on staff vacancies, some of which have been offset by costs of temporary staff. Just wanted to know what approximate levels of staff vacancies is the council running at the moment, and how can we as councils be reassured that this policy, whilst delivering some welcome financial savings, is not actually undermining the smooth and efficient running of services and the morale of staff who deliver them?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Power, for your question. the various parts of Chris' question, so I'd like to do this taken in order. So we've had some vacancies which we've tried to recruit to, but at this time were unsuccessful. We have some vacancies which we wanted to recruit to, but because demand of COVID meant recruitment was delayed or deferred. We've also had some vacancies which we successfully recruited to, but the time difference between one person leaving and another starts giving a saving. And we do have some posts that we did not recruit to as posts were earmarked for savings, which are on the agenda for approval tonight. So 978,000 result from a combination of factors. In terms of council policy, then it is absolutely clear. We aim to recruit to the budget that council approves. We understand that when teams are not fully staffed, it can have an impact on delivery and well-being. But I can assure the members that where there are gaps, officers are doing what they can to close those gaps or look at alternative ways of working. Naturally, in our financial position, we have asked SMT to consider before any recruitment whether there is an option to save. And I can confirm this process is happening with the services taking the opportunity to review how best we move forward. Finally, we are currently actively recruiting to 19 posts. 4 of these are new posts due to increased service pressures or realignment of existing roles and budgets. 2 are for maternity cover, 4 are roles within our children's service team, which are being held and identified for. 4 trainee social workers who have been supporting us for a year. 2 senior roles are pending recruitment and currently covered by interim managers. And 7 posts are active recruitment to replace post holders who have left or are about to leave. The council is currently working on its latest position and is committed to improving the transparency in finance reports, and we're providing an update on key staffing information as part of the financial reporting arrangement for Q1 on all future reports. And finally, sorry, I'm on the Wellbeing Board, sitting there with the officers, and I can assure you that there is some uncertainty amongst them, but actually clarity of where we're going actually gives them some comfort. So we need to be sure that we understand where we want to go. Thank you.
Supplementary.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for that very comprehensive answer. I obviously just wanted to clarify that surely, if a post is identified as necessary, it should be recruited to, and if it's not a necessary post, then it's no longer budgeted for. And I think you said obviously savings by vacancies is a bit of a short-term fix that can build up problems for the future. So I'm pleased to hear that is being addressed. And did you actually say we've got 19 current vacancies? Only an approximate, just as a...
Yeah, we're recruiting to 19 posts at this moment in time.
Is that 19 vacancies?
I think it's a mixture of things. As I ran through, there are 4 for realignment of budgets, so I can give you the answer afterwards. So you can.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, once more, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Can the portfolio holder please explain why there's to be a close cut of £60,000 to the funding of the public rights of way? This will be detrimental to access to the countryside and to the health and well-being benefits that brings to residents. This represents 66% cut in support. Will any other department be suffering such a large decrease in funding? And if not, why are public rights of way being targeted and cut so severely?
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. The sentiment behind it, I'm in complete agreement with. If we're to encourage people to make the most of and enjoy our countryside, then maintaining and enhancing the infrastructure has to be a central ambition. In terms of the revenue budget that you refer to in your question, hitherto this budget has been used for reactive maintenance and updating of existing infrastructure. Going forwards, the reduction in the revenue budget will mean that the statutory obligations of this particular department will be met, whilst the 60k formerly sitting in revenue will be in the integrated transport capital programme. A more proactive approach in terms of what we invest in will deliver more in terms of enhancing and promoting the use of our public rights of way. The local cycling walking improvement plan now has ring-fence funding to complete it, which in turn will mean that a strong evidence base can be at the heart of well-placed capital investment. As mentioned, this capital investment will sit with integrated transport, and schemes will come through the Highways Transport Working Group process. Likewise, the forthcoming vision resulting from the future Rutland conversation will assist with this evidence base. If the priority for Rutland is to enable greater and improved access to our countryside, then this will be reflected in policy and in the appropriate weighting given to schemes that deliver on this ambition. In terms of the overall budget and have other departments suffered similar cuts, the detail of that is in the paper you have before you tonight and will be covered by the portfolio holder for finance.
Supplementary.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Stevenson, for that reply. I mean, Matt Wake at the briefing last Wednesday said that the future Rutland project revealed that rural life, the environment are key to happiness and well-being, and that the public want better footpaths and cycle paths. The Countryside Access Forum, which I chair, we had a meeting on the 16th of June, and the members were horrified at the level of the cut and wanted it significantly reduced. So will the cuts be reduced so that things like kissing gates can still be installed on footpaths to allow access to the countryside for those of us who are less able?
So I will go back to the answers I've given. That budget has been moved into the capital pot, integrated transport. So therefore, I would suggest that if the overall ambition is about accessibility for those who are less able, then presumably that would be a logical use for kissing gates. It might be that actually something else comes out from that, but the main thing is that it's evidence-based and that we are able to be proactive, and certainly an ambition, I think, would need to be going, actually maybe it's over 5 years, but it means that everything joins up, and you'll be relieved to know that the vice chair of the access group also spoke to me about it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Powell, first question.
Okay, we've got time for it, that's good.
Go for it.
Go for it. Councillor Stevenson, a note from the scrutiny annual report under item 16 on this agenda that the recommendations from the biodiversity task and finish group, which their research and findings will now dovetail and feed into the work of the climate action group and its wider remit. The task and finish group reported to Growth Infrastructure Resources Scrutiny in October 2020, and there were some quite detailed recommendations which included a list of actions under each objective, and secondly, the progress against these actions was reported annually to the committee. So how exactly will these recommendations be monitored and recorded, and when and how will progress on these actions be reported?
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much for your question, Councillor Powell. I completely agree. It's so important that when work is undertaken, that the momentum for delivery is maintained. In terms of this particular report, as you are aware, there has been a commitment taken by this council on the 11th of January 2021 to declare a climate crisis and to develop a plan to deliver carbon neutrality by 2050 or as soon as is viable. Work, therefore, has been focused on this. I have formed a members' climate action group with meetings held regularly since the 20th of January 2021. You'll notice a 9-day gap between the full council declaration. The work undertaken has been phased. The first phase is to deliver on the ambition of a community climate action network. This has resulted in a highly successful, both in terms of numbers of attendees and breakfast speakers, climate summit at the beginning of May. Our first meeting of the Rutland Climate Action Network is due to take place this Thursday, from which a community strategy will be developed, and the Great Big Green Week in September will be an excellent launch for events across the county. I'm also delighted to note that due to the hard work of Councillor Burrows, we have secured lottery funding for a community Rutland Climate Action website. The second phase of work is the development of an RCC climate change strategy. This work will be underpinned by the baseline assessment procured with the Carbon Trust for completion this autumn. At this point, Councillor Powell, you may be forgiven for thinking that I'm not answering your question. What about biodiversity and the actions listed in the report? I've highlighted the work regarding climate change because that is what full council have committed to, and so it is right that energy is being focused on delivering on this. Good news, however, is that clearly climate change is inextricably linked to promoting biodiversity. Many of the action points are focused on community endeavour. These therefore will be reflected in the forthcoming community strategy. In terms of these actions that the report advised in terms of policies, some are already in hand. For example, the plant life guidance is being followed for our verge cutting this year, and the emergent trees policy is being worked on as we speak. The report is a list of well-researched actions. The next step is to be clear of the underlying principles to develop an overarching strategy that enables careful policy development to deliver. Any strategy must have a plan for implementation, monitoring and evaluation. I'm looking forward to the outputs from the future Rutland conversation and the community-driven vision for Rutland, as this will enable our corporate plan to set deliverable ambitions upon which to develop this crucial piece of work. I hope that answers your question.
Have a supplementary.
Yeah, thank you. I would appreciate some more specific information about when and how these actions will be reported rather than generic terms. And for example, and I'm pleased that we are taking action about biodiversity. Just an example, a recent planning application in Whissendine said that we don't have a policy for managing net ecological gain, which was one of the recommendations of the Task and Finish group, and that all developments should demonstrate no net loss to biodiversity via use of an approved Rutland County Council scoring matrix, a very specific recommendation. We're nearly a year on from that, so it's that type of thing. I'd like to know exactly when that will be in place. Thank you.
I've noted that, Councillor Pratt, just to let you know as well, which I didn't put in my original answer, the detailed report that came out of GIR, I, with the Members Climate Action Group, went through and identified the bits and where they fitted into. So some of the things, for example, will fit into the grounds maintenance procurement. I am very happy to give you specific times. That, for example, is being re-procured by 2023. The planning things, I would need to get advice from an officer, because it is, the planning element is moving out of portfolio. However, I completely take your point. You do need an overall arching strategy with that, but as I say, the climate change full council commitment is something that has been focused on.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm interested in the action that's going to be taken on these.
Am I allowed to say,
Sure you are.
I'm very happy to get documents with dates and things, but I do need a wee bit of.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Item 8, referral of committee decision to the council.
None have been referred, Chair.
Item 9, calling of decisions from cabinet meetings during the period from 8th of March to the 5th of July.
There have been no calling.
Thank you. Report from item 10, report from the cabinet. Under this item, we will hear from portfolio holders their recommendations for council determination. We'd like to invite Councillor Payne, portfolio holder for finance, to speak first.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, are you happy that I talk about the budget savings and the outturn successively? They're split in the agenda, but I'm okay to do that. Thank you. For everybody, Rutland residents and council colleagues alike, surviving the past 18 months of the pandemic have posed great personal and commercial challenge, making it a time like no other we've experienced in the past. COVID has generated ever-changing demand on the council through rapidly and frequently changing regulation and direction, creation of vaccination and testing centres, administering and delivering over £14 million worth of grants and thousands of grants, changing demands of social care for residents, to name but a few aspects. And on top of this, we have continued to deliver business as usual. I'd like to thank my RCC colleagues up front for doing such an excellent job in coping so admirably with all that has been thrown at them in this very turbulent time. Against this backdrop in February, the council set a budget that drew on £2.4 million of reserves, setting the task of achieving budget reductions of £1 million in 21-22 and a further 1.4 in 22-23 to replenish these reserves and stabilise the medium-term financial plan. In support of the budget challenge, proposals have been put forward by RCC officers that deliver a set of easier short-term savings that can be delivered now and bigger long-term projects that will deliver at some stage in the future. These potential savings are included in the document you see today and have been through all scrutiny committees. Committee comments are included in the papers and are generally supportive. Hopefully times are changing and we look forward to recovering from COVID, but the council is still understanding what the new landscape will look like, and it continues to carry significant financial risks that we need to mitigate to deal with this uncertainty. We still have much work to do against this backdrop. The impact of the pandemic could create unknown demands on income and demand-led budgets. Future government funding is unknown. There could be an economic downturn locally and nationally. We are expecting a social care white paper, a new environment bill, and a higher than anticipated pay award. And there's also potential rework to the local plan, just to list some of the financial risks we face. We still face capacity and resource issues because COVID demands still conflict with everyday business. It is imperative, therefore, that we mitigate these risks, and we can start this tonight by approving the principles outlined in the document, together with the budget savings and changes of funding proposed. I am fully supportive of this, and let's get on with it. We need to deliver savings this year to make an impact on this year's budget. The budget savings paper you have tonight in item 3 requests £500,000 under delegated control of the Section 151 officer, Chief Executive and Portfolio Holder Finance. This is to allow savings projects to be accelerated. We would like to withdraw this item from approval tonight. We have listened to scrutiny, and we will come back and ask on a case-by-case basis rather than make this request up front. But members should note that we will need to invest to save at some point if we are going to close our gap fully. Of the longer term savings, some of the big projects identified, leisure, waste and highways, are already being worked on. The plan for further projects and changing this category will be driven by the future Rutland conversation and the new corporate plan that will be created out of it this year. It is likely that a major transformation of the council will need to take place to meet the new corporate plan priorities and the financial challenge we face in the medium term, as even the projects identified in this report, if fully delivered, would not close our existing gap, which is only likely to get bigger. Scrutiny and all members will be fully engaged in this as the plan takes shape and progresses. Moving on to the 2021 budget outturn, I'm very pleased to present a positive position of 2.4 million underspend against the year-end budget for last year. This report has been fully debated and was scrutinised by Growth Infrastructure and Resources Committee on the 10th of June. Whilst there was some concern expressed about swings in the budgets, particularly those in demand-led areas, no one can deny what a good job the council has done in managing its finances in very difficult circumstances. The underspend is good news for the reason it will help towards managing the financial pressures RCC will experience this year. There is a huge list, as I mentioned earlier. I am asking council to approve 21-22 budget adjustment as per Appendix E1 for the new grant income of 1.567 million and planned expenditure of 1.48 million, and also one new reserve for new donations. Whilst we are considering these recommendations tonight, members will already be thinking about the financial year ahead. We will soon have our first financial report for 21-22, and we will use this report to shine a light on key issues that can affect our finances, building on the issues already explained. I remain concerned about our medium-term financial plan, and in the short term, our priorities will be to deliver savings agreed tonight and manage our budget risks effectively to minimise any long-term impacts. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pett. Members, any questions? No? You're off the hook. As there are no further questions, then I will look to take the vote on the first set of recommendations as outlined in report 64/2021. These are that Council 1 approves the principles in para 2.2.2 to guide future work and decision making in respect of budget savings. 2, approves budget savings of 598,000 to be applied in 21-22 and changes to funding of 613,000. Delegate 3, delegates authority to the Director and Chief Finance Officer in consultation with the Chief Executive, Leader and Portfolio Holder for Finance to spend 172,000 in invest to save
Chair, number 3 is withdrawn.
Recommendation 3 was withdrawn.
Sorry, yeah. Excuse me, so, well, we'll still call it 4. Notes the provisional position on the 2021 outturn, paragraph 2.6, and that the provision underspend does not change the projected gap of 2.7 million for 22-23. These are proposed by Councillor Payne. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Baines. Those in favour, please raise your hands.
Oh, sorry, Chair, it's Stevenson.
Sorry.
Baines the books.
Sorry. Old habits die hard.
22, Mr. Chairman, are there any people against, anyone against?
Anybody against? Abstention?
One abstention. 23.
Thank you. So we have 22 in favour and 1 abstention. I will now take the vote on the recommendation outlined in 66/2021. These are that council approves the 21-22 budget adjustments for new grant income of 1.567 million and planned expenditure of 1.458 million as per Appendix E1. 2, approves the setting up of one new reserve for donations received as detailed in section 3.5.3. 3, notes potential future pressures highlighted in Appendix G. Notes changes to the capital programme as per section 4 and Appendix F. Notes the revised MTFP in Appendix 1, which assumes that Cabinet Council will approve decisions recommended in this report and the budget savings report 64/2021. And 6, notes the view of the Council's S151 officer that the positive outturn position does not change the financial challenge facing the Council and that action is needed quickly to reduce reliance on reserves. Councillor Payne has proposed it. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Stevenson. All those in favour? 22. Abstentions? I'll go straight to it. So that's 22 and 1 abstention. We now move to report number 65/2021, the Highways Capital Programme, second allocation 21-22. Councillor Stevenson, over to you.
Thank you ever so much, Chair. This report asks for your approval for the spend of the second highways maintenance block funding allocation of £1,487,000 on proactive highways maintenance for drainage, bridges, street lighting, structural survey, carriageway and footways works as outlined in Appendix A. You will also note in Appendix A how the first allocation of capital funding has been spent. Approval of this report enables the Council to carry out its statutory duties as the local highways authority and to deliver on the objectives of our corporate plan. I'm not going to go through the individual schemes, rather focus on Appendix B, as this assures members that money is being spent in the right places at the right times to deliver the overall aim of maintaining a highways network that follows the principle of prevention is better than cure, whilst ensuring that from an engineering perspective, our network is as safe as possible within the budget available. Appendix B explains how and why the specific pieces of work are chosen, a careful rolling programme of inspections that ensures full knowledge and understanding of the condition of our highways network so that every carriageway, footpath, bridge, street light is reg rated to ensure our money is spent wisely. Further details of our inspections policy, including regularity and frequency, can be found on the website. I'm pleased to offer further assurances to members that this programme demonstrates we are spending on the right things at the right times by noting that for a third consecutive year, Rutland has received the highest band of incentive funding. This funding is awarded on the basis of the processes followed by an authority when developing its capital programme. As the highest band, this has brought in an additional £265,000 to the budget. Furthermore, our approach to capital maintenance of our highways has resulted in our roads being amongst the best in the East Midlands. The performance update for 2021 confirmed this with the key KPIs for roads achieving above target, with 82% of our A roads, 84% of our B roads and 75% of our C roads being classed as good or better. I therefore have no qualms in asking for your approval. Despite significant churn within the Highways Department over the last couple of years, the overall condition of our highways network demonstrates prudent and sound use of the capital funds received from the DFT. I'm very happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you. Members, have we got any questions? Councillor Biddy.
Just have one, Lucy. I was just looking on page 18, bridge reference 860, Mill Street, Deddington. I didn't know Deddington was in Rutland. It's in Northamptonshire, isn't it?
Ticks over.
It's not in Rutland.
Yeah, can I bring in Councillor Payne's expert geographical knowledge?
Yeah, it's in Tixover in my ward. The bridge is actually on the border between Tixover and Budington, and the bridge is actually in Tixover.
Anybody else? Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, Councillor Stevenson, are any of these works down to be repaired due to utility damage or poor workmanship from our contractors?
Not that I'm aware of. In terms of the utilities work, we have, if you check on the website with our inspections policy, it will identify when we check things. Obviously, capital works that we have obviously procured tarmac to do, we will go and inspect those, and if they are a fail due to workmanship, they will then be repaired by tarmac and we will not incur additional cost.
Will those areas be included in this list?
That have been inspected. This is forthcoming work that is coming.
I understand. Right. If I may, Mr. Chairman, we have Barleythorpe Manor Lane. The workmanship on this was absolutely appalling. It is broken up. I noted that it was in the schedule of works. I merely want to know whether our taxpayers have got to pay for this or whether we return to the contractors who did an appalling job.
Chair, if you're happy, can I take that out of the meeting, because I do need to speak to my interim head of highways to ask.
You'll come back to.
Yeah, is that all right?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, that would have been perfectly okay, but as I've been asking this question for probably a year, I would like an answer within 24 hours. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay.
And an answer on West Road, please.
Yeah, that is noted. I'm just also going to note, though, the interim head of highways, hence our staff churn, is currently on compassionate leave due to losing his mother. So I'd be grateful if you could have
A little bit of compassion. I always have a lot of compassion.
Brilliant. So if I'm over the 24 hours, you will understand why. Mr.
I may forgive you.
Thank you. That's very gracious of you, Mr.
Take
Cross.
care.
Councillor McCartney.
Thanks, Jeff. I thought Councillor Cross might have been hinting at the road repairs outside his driveway for a moment. So obviously not.
That's Severn Trent.
Severn Trent, yeah, that's what I thought he might have been getting at. Anyway, my question, I can't see Market Overton's bridge repair on the footpath in this list. That footpath is currently closed. I just want reassurance that is being fixed.
That might, and I'm afraid, Councillor McCartney, I am going to need to go outside the meeting. That might have come through our revenue budget through Fix My Street, but I will check.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? No? As there are no further questions, I will take the vote on the following recommendation. That the spend of the Department of Transport, DfT, for the balance of the Highways Maintenance Block funding allocation and both the capital pothole and incentive funds received, as well as the carried forward 106,000 to the value of 1,487,000 is used for proactive highway drainage, bridges, street lighting, structural survey, carriageway and footway works as per Appendix A. This is proposed by Councillor Stevenson. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Payne. All those in favour, please. Twenty-two. Abstentions? Thank you. 22 and one abstention. Reports from committees of the council. We haven't any, have we? No. Reports from scrutiny commission. We haven't had any. Thank you. Item 13, joint arrangements and external organisations. I'll go in a clockwise order if anybody has. Councillor Fox.
I'd like to update you on the progression of 4 Oakham. We held our first arts and craft market on Saturday. Due to COVID restrictions, we only had 8 stands, but the event was very successful. We're looking to have 15 stands in August, hopefully rising to 25 after the restrictions are lifted. The initiative is to encourage more people to come into Oakham and drive the footfall from Tesco's to the High Street. And this will be held on the first Saturday of each month. I would like to thank Oakham Town Council for their financial support to ensure that this project has gone ahead.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Roxley.
Again, just to update council on the Rutland Fair Trade Forum. They're very active at the moment, and we're working to renew Uppingham's Fair Trade Town status. That's quite a long way down the road now. But as I say, things have been held up because of COVID, and we haven't been able to get the outdoor events which we used to have. But just to reassure council that is still alive and kicking and going strong. Thank you.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you. Just to update council that I attended the annual conference of the National Association of Standing Advisory Committees on Religious Education. Obviously, the Rutland SACRE has a statutory remit of advising the Council on Religious Education, which is in accordance with the agreed syllabus and supporting effective provision of collective worship. Interesting conference to bring back lots of thoughts on world views, how this is incorporated into our new syllabus, which SACRE will be working on from September 2023. And I'm happy to provide members with further information about the work of SACRE outside this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gould.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, just an update, members, on the Combined Fire Authority. The annual general meeting took place on the 16th of June, a few weeks ago. It was very much an administration meeting because it's the start of a new term for Leicestershire County Council and Leicester City. Last time there were many retirements, some members who did not get re-elected, and therefore a whole raft of new members. So it was very much an administration meeting. I have been asked to chair corporate governance again. I've been asked to deputise for the leader, Nick Rushton, at some meetings, and we will choose the chair of our employment committee at our first meeting. So we now have 2 meetings coming before the September council, and I will give a more detailed report at that time. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Burns.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chairman. Since the last council, I've attended 3 Zoom meetings on your behalf. I never thought you'd hear me say those words. Rural Community Council, which I'm sure most members think in terms of village halls, but it does far more than that. And in particular, a very good recent initiative, and for those of you I think who are familiar with the Leicester communication system, there have been some very positive interviews on Leicester Radio, but in particular, the scheme Coffee Connect, whereby a van goes around dishing out coffee, but really deals with rural isolation. Came to Wing 3 weeks ago. I think they had 30 people. I certainly attended, and it was very much appreciated. I was asked by the employees who were dealing with it if there were any other villages who would like that. So again, if there are members who would like them to include them on the schedule, please do. It's completely free, it is informal, and it works very well. Equally, again, it's not just village halls, suicide awareness training, which I know will resonate with members in view of a recent event. That is part of it, and that advice and mental health advice, as well as things like neighbourhood planning. So if your parish in your wards not already a member, I suggest they might consider it. So that was the first meeting. The second was the Welland River Catchment Partnership. 3 Rutland things. The Baron member will be delighted to know that the water bowl scheme on the Welland is being underway. North Lethenham, there is a riparian pathway being considered, and in Ryle, probably the most exciting of all, wash improvement, and the bid is for 16,000, and it is at least progressing to the next stage. So that's all positive thing. And then the most important meeting, the leader asked me to represent him at the SPARS meeting, that's the sparsely populated rural areas. In fact, you're going to get 2 for the price of 1, if you'll indulge me, because there was both a morning and an afternoon meeting. Now, the morning meeting featured a presentation from a chap called Adrian Jenkins, who is the founder of something called Pixel Financial Management. But in particular, he's looking at the way in which rural authorities are actually disadvantaged. I'm pleased to tell you that Rutland got a mention in that as well, because we replied to that survey he was doing. And it's all the sort of things that in a way you would expect. What happens with remote, and we counted remote with low dispersal, don't ask me too much about the jargon, but basically it's all the things you would expect. The extra cost of outside suppliers, the fact that we are remote, you don't get as many people bidding for those contracts, and therefore it becomes more expensive. Again, 1 or 2 figures, and I'm happy to share this with any member out of the meeting who would like the detailed information. I have got quite a few facts jotted down. And then sometimes you get something that wasn't immediately on the agenda, but I think will fascinate you from a Rutland point of view and planning policy. South Norfolk, the delegate from there, said that they had had 2 recent applications, planning applications in the past 5 years, one for 1,200 houses and one for 1,400 houses. There was, I think it's fair to say, grave dissatisfaction in the result. So I asked the director, without putting too much burden on Officer Time, to follow this up to South Norfolk, because and if that doesn't happen, I will follow it up myself. The South Norfolk have decided that they will put a cap on any individual development of 25 houses. Now, how this fits with their local plan and whether they needed to go ab initio from it, that is what I want to find out. What they have found, and I think this has run for 2 years now, what they have found is that this means that local builders actually bid for these developments rather than national builders. it has resulted in far greater local satisfaction that they're getting the houses where they want them, in the sort of size they want, that the local builders are better on design and better on materials. And of course, it provides local employment for independent businesses. So I thought that was very exciting news. I would hope, Mr. Chairman, that if I do, I'm able to give more information, then I would certainly come back to council with that. So that was the morning session. The afternoon session, again, went into the funding. It was strictly speaking the rural economy subgroup. Again, rural disadvantage, all the metrics that central government use do not favour rural communities. I don't think there are any surprises in what I'm going to tell you here. Again, rural funding, we've got low wages, again, the metrics don't help, high costs, lower job security. Again, the bidding for the Fair Property Fund, very much the advice was to keep it simple, but again, it should be local authorities deciding where that cash, any cash, goes to. And finally, the Queen's speech, it makes all the sort of pious noises about local delivery to meet local needs, but when it comes down to the thing, urban 61%, they get £107 per capita compared to a third of that for a rural area, a totally unfair system. And so SPARS is campaigning on that. Transport, broadband, policing, all these things we are underfunded on. Again, urban, again, I've got some figures, but urban comes up at £39.41, rural £7.53. I mean, it is, when you're actually, as you know, I'm not a particularly finance or figures person. There are several much abler minds than mine around this table on this, but it is terrifyingly inequitable, Chairman. Again, housing, more affordable, local development, I've always, in a sense, referred to that in the morning one. And basically, the answer was, we're not going to see very much before 23, 24. The whole thing's in limbo. So don't hold your breath. But what I would say, and I know the leader attends on occasion, I'm sure that these points will have our full support, I hope, members as a council, to try and remove some of these inequalities. And of course, as ever, it hits the poorest in our society worst. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Baines, and congratulations on your hat trick of Zooms. It's a long while since you had a hat trick.
A very long while, Chairman.
Chairman, I have a question.
Sorry, Mark, yes.
I have a question with regards to the Water Authority, in that I was wondering if you could comment on reports that Rutland has got very poor water quality on the back of a number of incidents of pollution into our water courses. I don't know if you were able to get any information about that.
I haven't, sorry, through you, Chairman. No, Councillor, I haven't got that information. But as it happens, I am going to the Northern Region Environment Agency meeting, I think on the top of my head, it's the 19th of July. So I'd be very happy, even via Zoom, to raise your question, and I think it's a perfectly valid one. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll provide you with the information.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Anybody else? I think it's finished now. Thank you.
Oh, Chair, sorry. There was an email earlier on from Gail Wallace.
Oh, sorry, yes, there was indeed, yeah. I've received a written report from Gail Waller on her meeting of the Carlton House charity, and this will be included in the minutes. Anybody else? No. Right, item 14, appointment of strategic directors People Directorate, pages 161 to 164, to receive for this report from the Chief Executive. Sorry, Gordon Brown to introduce.
Thank you, Chair. With the unfortunate absence of Councillor Waller this evening, who actually chaired the Chief Officer Appointment Committee, Governance has asked me in my role as Chair of the Employment Appeals Committee to present the report from that committee. Following the approval by Council on the 7th of June of the revised structure in the People Directorate, the Chief Officer Appointment Committee, comprising of Councillors Waller, Oxley, Walters, Wilby and myself, met on the 17th of June and carried out the interviews of 2 candidates. Following those interviews, the committee unanimously agreed to recommend to Council the appointment of John Morley as Strategic Director of Adults and Health, and Mrs. Dawn Godfrey as Strategic Director of Children and Families. Subsequent to that recommendation, the Monitoring Officer notified Cabinet, who have all confirmed their support for the appointments. Chair, I'd therefore like to propose the appointments as recommended in the report, and also the delegation to the Monitoring Officer to amend the Constitution to reflect these changes if approved.
Thank you, Jim. Could I have a second? Second, and then I'll take questions. Secondly?
Yes.
Yeah, Councillor Oxley. Are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, this is a most excellent choice. We have got some exceptional directors and have had some exceptional directors. Now, both John and Dawn will fill this role admirably, and I am really so pleased that these positions have been filled as such. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Thank you, Chair. As the portfolio holder for Education and Children's Services, I'd like to endorse Mrs. Godfrey very much indeed. I think she's joined us at a difficult and challenging period, and she's come across really well and built in her confidence, and now runs an extremely improving service. She's done an excellent job, and in passing, because I know the portfolio holder isn't here, let me just say that Mr. Morley has done an excellent job in terms of running everything on the health side during the pandemic. He's always shown a great deal of innovation and always puts people first in his actions.
Thank you. Anybody else? We'll take the following recommendations together. That Council, on the recommendation of the Chief Officer Appointment Committee, approves the appointment of Mr. John Morley as Strategic Director of Adults and Health, Mrs. Dawn Godfrey as Strategic Director of Children and Families, and 2, delegate authority to the Monitoring Officer to amend the Constitution, including the scheme of delegation, to reflect the changes to the senior management team. All those in favour, please. 23, thank you. Item 15, the Boundary Commission proposals, pages 165 to 172 from the Monitoring Officer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very briefly, members, you have the report before you. It is an item for noting. The proposal is from the Boundary Commission, and you will see it fully outlined in the report. It is, if there are comments, then it is for individual members and others who wish to feed in through the Boundary Commission. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to take any questions.
Has anybody got any questions?
Councillor.
Yeah.
And what's the new constituency going to be called? Because I'm old enough to remember when it was Rutland and Stamford before. Is it going to be called that again?
That does appear to be the proposal, Councillor Brown. Right. So I don't think it's absolutely finalised as yet. So if you wish to feed in views, you may through the Boundary Commission.
Okay. Anybody else? We'll have to receive and note the report. So item 16, the annual scrutiny report, 173 to 190. Receive report 94/21 from the Scrutiny Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2021
municipal year has been an unusual year for so many reasons. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank my scrutiny member colleagues for their support, flexibility and commitment during this period. And this also includes my fellow scrutiny chairs who have fully played their part in making our work this year so effective. I'd also like to say special thanks to our officers and especially governance for their support during these unusual times. The annual scrutiny report provides a summary of the work undertaken by individual scrutiny committees and the scrutiny commission during the period 2020-21. This report was due to be presented at the end of the 2021 municipal year, but due to special council meetings, the report was put back to the next available council meeting. I now request the council notes the annual report, and I look forward to any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions from members? No. Thank you. Item 17, the council prayer, pages 191 to 194. This report, 97/2021, and Councillor Hensley will introduce it.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would just like to introduce this item and wait for the discussion before I make any proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Harding.
Chair, I move to defer any decision on report 97/2021 until the results of the census have been published. Whilst I appreciate fellow members have strong feelings with regard to these matters, the census will give us an up-to-date data set on the face of our community. I believe any decision we take as members should be based around evidence, and by waiting until approximately March 22, when the initial results are through, we allow for a more informed discussion and debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Fox. Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Chairman. I think this is a very sensible motion from Councillor Harvey. I think for members of the public in particular, given the difficulties we're facing at the moment with various things, I don't think it is a sensible moment to be voting something which we know there are strong opinions on all sides. I suspect we all have personal views. I don't think an acrimonious debate this evening would be helpful, and I would therefore propose, Chairman, that the question be put and we move on to more important things.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cross.
We'll move immediately to the vote on the matter.
Yeah, we'll go straight to the vote. All those in favour?
What are we voting on?
On deferral. Yeah. All those in favour? Can't see them. 15. 15 against. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Yes.
Yep. 22. So it's 15 for, 7 against. Thank you.
So the 20 abstention, I think we're voting to 23. Councillor voted.
Oh, sorry.
Abstain.
Abstention.
Just for clarity, Mr. Chairman, that was 15 for, 7 against, and 1 abstention, and therefore the motion to defer has been carried.
Item 18, notice of motion. Have we any notice of motion?
Notice of motion. Yeah.
Any urgent business? To receive any urgent business which is previously notified to the person presiding. I have notified the Chief Executive and Monitoring Officer that I would like further discussion on the debate of the special council meeting to be held on the local plan. The meeting was cancelled by governance after a members' briefing, but in my opinion, this was not done preemptively, as the cancellation of the special meeting of the council is the prerogative of the chairman. The date, therefore, has been reinstated and put back in the meeting's calendar. So I'd just like to start off with what I'd like to say. Members, I brought this to your attention because in May you elected me as your chairman of Rutland County Council, and with this goes a responsibility to oversee our meetings and represent our county, but above all, to ensure that we uphold and preserve our constitution. Last week, our constitution was not upheld. I was not consulted at any time regarding the change of date of our special meeting to vote on the local plan on the 26th of July. And then, because of an upcoming by-election, delayed until the second week in September. The reason for this was to have a full complement of members, i.e. 27. I have served on this council in district and county status for 22 years and attended well over 200 meetings. At no time of which have I heard it expressed that we needed a full membership attending. When elected, our main duty is to represent the county of Rutland and its people. We are summoned to our council meetings, not invited. So we are summoned to our council meetings, not invited. So it is our duty to attend. But the meetings have always gone on if there were 2 or 3 missing. I have never seen or heard of one being cancelled. To my surprise, on Friday at 1:50, excuse me, 10 minutes before my briefing with our officers, I received an email to say that the meeting on the 26th was postponed. This was without any consultation with myself. Therefore, I called the item under any other business to debate. The CEO told us a while ago that the 26th of July was the last possible date we could debate the plan before going forward. No mention that there should be a full complement of members. To my mind, the goalposts have now been changed to accommodate a new councillor who will not be up to speed and would therefore, in good faith, probably abstain. I will wait to hear the debate, but at this moment in time, I am minded to keep the date to the 26th of July. Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am and have been somewhat confused, which is unusual for me. Late on the afternoon of the 29th of June, I received a call from the leader of Rutland County Council with a message. I subsequently returned that call and was asked by the leader if I would be available on the 28th of July should the council meeting of the 26th be moved. I replied that without consulting my diary, I could not confirm. I presume that on that afternoon, all councillors received a similar call from the leader of the council concerning changing the date of that council meeting. I would just hesitate there, just in case any members here were not contacted.
I wasn't consulted. I wasn't consulted.
Wasn't consulted.
No, that's the councillor's comment.
So a number of councillors sitting on Rutland County Council were not contacted by the leader of Rutland County Council over the change of date, the proposed change of date for that rather important council meeting. Furthermore, Mr. Chairman, and at this stage, I am somewhat disturbed. At the planning meeting on that same Tuesday evening, we had a most important and contentious application for outline planning permission on a site off the Braunston Road. A large number of objections had been received, over 130. And having read a deputation objecting to this proposal from the ward member, Councillor Ian Rosell, and listened to 3 deputations opposing the application, including one from the ward member, then Councillor Woodley. The application was considered for deferral until the following meeting of the Planning Committee on Tuesday, the 27th of July. The dates are rather important. Discussion then ensued between the chairman, Councillor Edward Baines, and Rutland County Council officers, with the result that the committee members were informed that because the council meeting of the 26th of July, at which the local plan would be considered, had been changed to Wednesday, the 28th of July, there was no reason to defer the decision. The result of the subsequent vote on this application is known. However, I put it to members that had we not received the inaccurate and misleading information of the change of date for the special meeting of council, the decision would have been deferred until the situation with the local plan had been clarified. Bear with me, Mr. Chairman. I would ask the chairman of the planning committee to confirm the details that I've stated and outline a possible way forward. That would entail this council sending the application back to the planning committee for further deliberation, because the prevarication over the 26th has therefore led to a poor decision, because the decision was based on incomplete information.
Mr. Chairman, if I may come in and assist and advise, perhaps on this matter, on some of the information Councillor Cross has presented. I think a timeline rather assists on this. I can confirm that governance were exploring a second date. At no time was the meeting formally moved, Mr. Chairman, to the 28th. So on that point, the meeting, just for absolute clarity, there was no movement of the meeting to the 28th formally. So Councillor Cross, I do hope that I understand there may be some confusion between members. However, there was no formal movement of the.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much indeed from the monitoring officer there. There is no doubt in my mind that during the discussions at that planning committee meeting, our chairman was informed that the special council meeting would be moved to the Wednesday, the 28th, which was the day after the planning meeting, and therefore there was no point deferring the decision on the Braunston application, because the local plan would not have been discussed. And if you would bear with me, I will now just reread what I have just stated. I would ask the chairman of the planning committee to confirm the details that I have stated and outline a possible way forward that would entail this council sending the application back to the planning committee for further deliberation, because the prevarication over the 26th has therefore led to a poor decision, because the decision was based on incomplete information. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I will make a statement of personal explanation. I hope you will allow me to take part in the debate subsequently and not count this as part of my time. Thank you. What I would say is this, members, and I think I'll have to take you back before the actual meeting. Councillor Cross is quite right that I did say to the officers that at my briefing meeting on Thursday that I was not secure enough in the argument that the emerging local plan had been confirmed, because I was aware originally that it was coming on the 26th of July. At the briefing meeting, and I spoke to Mr. Woodley, I can now call him Mr. Woodley, as you know, on the Councillor Woodley. I spoke to him because there was some doubt about his ability to attend, and I did say to him I was going at that briefing to ask for a deferral. Now, this is no reflection, Chairman, on the planning officers. They perfectly reasonably said that they were not happy with this when I asked for it, because of the 5-year housing supply and the danger of non-determination. So I have no criticism of the operators at all. I have self-criticism that although I asked if we could get that meeting dealt with in the time, given the weight of it, I didn't press hard enough for the deferral of the Uppingham planning application, which was not urgent, and the moving up the agenda of the Jail Street while I'm looking at members of the committee. So I don't feel that I actually did this council any favours in briefing, because I didn't look at the workload properly. But having said that, I think I would have been supportive. I was approached by 3 members. I very carefully did not let them predetermine anything or suggest anything untoward, but I did say, should any one of those three members' feelings. I felt on that I would be sympathetic to a motion to defer. We now move on to the meeting itself, and as those members of the planning committee who were present will be aware, I prefaced my remarks saying that my reasons for putting for deferral were now no longer valid, as we were, I won't get into the detail of whether we were on 28th or 26th, but what was certain, we were not meeting on the 26th, as far as I understood it. Therefore, my reason and my logic for deferral altered. We then, as you know, had a debate. We moved, and it was eventually approved in line with the officer recommendation. Bear in mind that two members of that committee were unable to be present. And I know they'll turn it around to this. Let's face it again. In the end, 6 members voted in favour. I was concerned about it. I felt that it wasn't entirely a sound thing. I've been in considerable correspondence over the telephone with the monitoring officer. And in particular, I asked him if the mechanism to refer it to you members as full council could be implemented. Now, the monitoring officer and I spent several hours on this. He has quite rightly referred to the minutes of October 2018, when we upped the membership of the committee from 10 to 12, to be more democratic, people will agree. We, in fact, at that point, were quite rightly legally advised that what we've been doing for years in Rutland, which was to treat this council as the planning committee to make the decision, was not in conformity with local government legislation. Therefore, we couldn't do that. Now, both the previous chairman and I, of the record, I think some of the members, I haven't spoken to everybody, recollected that what we were doing was as I've outlined, but we also thought that we had left something in place that was that this council, full council, should be notified of that decision if 2 members or more were concerned about it. And then they had 2 options, either to approve what the planning committee had done, in which case that was it, or to send it back to the planning committee for a second thought. Now, what the monitoring officer has found quite correctly in those minutes is that there is no mention of that particular fallback. Now, I am personally, Chairman, very concerned that a planning committee should not be subject to review by this full council, which I certainly regard as the sovereign body in this council, and I think it should be. Now, the monitoring officer is very kindly following things up to see if there's any other legal remedy. If there is not, Chairman, then at the next council meeting, I shall certainly be proposing some form of mechanism, because I am not happy with what seems to be the position at the moment. Thank you, Chairman. That's the end of my personal explanation. I hope it is reasonably clear, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, that comes as a great surprise, as I remember that we have actually brought planning. And I would also ask if there's somebody talking down the end. Could they please be stopped from talking, please? So yes, I remember that we have actually brought decisions to this place from the planning committee, and the decision was made at that planning committee that it would be called in, and it was taken to full council. And as you rightly say, full council debated it, and the decision went back to the planning committee. And that was post the update to the change to the way that we operated. So I'm very surprised to hear that decision, I think we've done it several times. I don't know whether or not that means that it's actually, they were actually not legal.
Mr. Chairman, on Councillor Oxley's point, I'm very happy to speak to Councillor Oxley to identify where those decisions were post 2018. As I can't recall them, Councillor Oxley, being since 2018. I don't.
We have definitely had one come back. I'm sure Edward, Councillor Baines would certainly back me up on that. I can't remember exactly which one.
Sorry, through you, Chairman. Yes, I'd be grateful if the monitoring officer did look, but my recollection is similar to yours, Councillor Oxley. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. There was certainly one post 2016, which Mr. Lammy brought back. I can't remember when that was.
Councillor Harvey.
Can I add just a point of clarity, if I can, just with regard to the agenda items on the planning meeting we're discussing. It's my understanding that actually the Bronston Road debate was moved in order for Councillor Woodley to be able to attend, in order so that he could speak on behalf of his residents, because he was unfortunately not able to attend at the beginning, which is, in my mind, why we heard Uppingham and the Gell Street applications before the Bronston Road one. So I just want to make that very clear that it is my understanding that that was moved so that Councillor Woodley could advocate on behalf of the residents.
Yes. Anybody else? Councillor Rizzo.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I don't want to talk about Bronston Road for obvious reasons, but I do want to talk about comments that were made about time on council. I disagree that time on council makes a ward member more informed. I think that's completely incorrect, and it's prejudging the ability of the individual who may or may not be elected. I think the opportunity to represent residents is paramount, and I can only imagine the disgust of residents of a ward who are not fully represented when that were to go to council. I think my final comment would be about the rigours of planning, and it should always be about the application, not a date or something else.
That's fair.
Question for Martin, officer, really. Is there any possibility that we actually go to Varies by granting the permission for the Bronston Road development? Because I've been looking at Taunton and Whiteton Parish Council versus Huntingdon District Council. It's pretty similar.
There's always the possibility of challenge that I can't rule out, Councillor Brown. However, I was listening into that planning meeting from home in that particular way. I didn't hear anything on that evening that made me question the legality of the decision that you made. I will look again at that particular point in consultation with the various members who've raised issues on that this evening. If I may, Mr. Chairman, I'll move on from there. I will continue as your monitoring officer and with other officers, and I've been in dialogue with the Chief Executive and various other members today to liaise with Councillor Baines in relation to the considerations that Councillor Baines is putting. If I might suggest, Councillor Baines, then bringing those proposals that you outlined through CRWG, should we get to that place, would be the appropriate place, so members can make a recommendation that's worked through, and you have the proposals and officer advice before you. Would be a suggestion that, obviously, as councillors will be voted, does not bind you, Councillor Baines. However, I offer merely in order to assist. On the substantive matter that you placed on the agenda under any other business, Mr. Chairman, and that is the date of the meeting. Members will, I hope, have a piece of paper in front of them that I have drafted, again in consultation with others, about having a meeting during this period.
Apologies for interrupting, and apologies to the monitoring officer. I would like to say something on the planning matter as raised by Councillor Cross and Councillor, and also Councillor Oxley, because there is some clear information missing here, which I think is critical to the debate this evening. The old system that we had with planning matters was that in the normal way, a planning issue was looked into. In those days, we had a minibus, and if you remember, we travelled around the county looking at the specific planning applications. And in the normal way that we do now, there is a full debate within the planning committee and a decision made. However, if we use the case of Braunston Road, the rules and regulations within the Constitution then said that if members of the planning committee, and in fact it was open to other members as well, felt that the wrong decision had been made, that decision could be called in, and Councillor Baines and I were discussing the Constitution, there would have to be 4/5 members would put in a note, and it was critical by, I think, 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock on the Tuesday following the decision of the previous week, which was the Wednesday or Thursday. Now, that went on for many years, but, yes, sorry.
That doesn't have to be members of the planning committee, does it?
No, at that particular time, it was not members of the planning committee, but invariably, there were probably the planning committee people outnumbered, but there could be other, if it was a ward member, for example, they would be asked to look at it, and that happened. Now, there was an issue there that what happened then, it would come to full council for ratification or passing or deferral or whatever. There was an issue there, of course, that then we had some councillors who were not qualified to take part in the debate because they had not had the planning training and were not up to date. So the decision back, you are saying, in 2018, it was taken that if there was such a concern, the matter would be referred to council, but council would not debate it, but they would turn it over and return it to the planning committee for further debate and decision. And obviously, the reason we then increased the planning committee from 10 to 12 was to give a greater balance to important decisions. Planning decisions are critical, and this council must be as professional as it's possible to be. So we have highlighted a big failure for some reason within our systems, because at this moment in time, we have no safety net, we have no fallback. And I was discussing this with Councillor Baines, saying, are we out of time now? Because normally it was not a week, it was normally a matter of days. So whatever we've discussed this evening, there has got to be a re-examination of our planning rules and regulations so that there is a safety net for situations such as this. Otherwise, this council could possibly face financial damages of a very serious nature. But certainly I agree with Councillor Oxley. My recall is very clear with Councillor Baines, Councillor Cross, and I'm sure, I think at the time, Chairman, you were also a member of the planning commission. So whatever we do, that is a full explanation of where we were. Something seriously has gone amiss in that element, obviously not being present in the minutes. And therefore, we can only leave the monitoring officer to liaise with the chairman and other councillors, but we will have to find a resolution. We will have to address the constitution on these matters directly. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.
Chairman, again, I'm grateful for the history lesson, but I'm not entirely sure that we've heard anything new there. We are trying to discuss something tonight, and it isn't history, it is what we do today.
So it's not history, Councillor.
Through the chairman, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Something we have missed out, part of the constitution. Apologies, I will.
Councillor McCartney.
Thank you, Chairman. The planning vote on that item last week was difficult because we had to balance up, and Councillor Beggy, I think, quite similarly to me on this, we had to balance up a very difficult decision about safeguarding the 5-year supply or in voting against that particular site, leaving ourselves open to effectively having to approve one of the other items on the agenda, which is now postponed, And those items, those applications are not in full in the emerging local plan as the Braunston Road one was. So in terms of the local plan coming forward, the Braunston Road one, in my view, did carry a little bit more validity than the other two applications on there. We also had a rather pressing matter, as we've already heard, of the risk of non-determination and possibility of appeals against any decision that we did make. So I think we all felt it really was the lesser of two evils on the evening to approve. Well, 6 of us felt it was the lesser of two evils to approve that particular site. I did not enjoy voting in favour of it one bit, but it was a very difficult balance that we had to make. I've no knowledge of previous mechanisms because I wasn't here in 2018, so I'm finding that very interesting, I have to say.
Thank you. I think Oliver's actually in front of me, so. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to take you back to the very beginning of Councillor Cross's comments. I phoned him as a leader of the Conservative group, not leader of the council, and I was inquiring about availability. I did not suggest anything was going to be moved to a specific date, just inquiring availability. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to reply to that. Why would the leader of the Conservative group ring me to see if I was available for another meeting if the Conservative group were going to be the only ones consulted? And I take that as a slight, Mr. Chairman. There was something most underhand going. I won't even mention this. There was something most underhand going on, which is why I have raised the issue this evening. We made a decision at the Planning Committee, which is a quasi-judicial committee, under false information.
Can we? I think members have debated the planning application enough now.
Thank you.
I would like to hear from other members on the item I brought up.
Okay, Chairman. I would like to just come back on a couple of points on the planning, not on the planning decision, but on the points raised. And I actually sat in the council meeting when the decision was made. No decision was, and please look not only at the council meeting minutes, but also at the Constitutional Working Group meeting minutes, which made the recommendation to council. And I haven't looked at them, but I'll guarantee they're the same. And it did not make any reference about council being the final arbiter on planning decisions. And I believe the reason put forward at that time, and asked the monitoring officer this, is, as Councillor Cross has just pointed out, the decision of the planning committee is a judicial process, not just a quasi-judicial process. And therefore, to have a planning application through second jeopardy, and those keep getting sent back for review, would be unacceptable from a legal standpoint. That was my understanding on the evening of that council meeting when we discussed it. And that was the reason that it was taken away from council and the planning committee was increased to 12 so that we would have the planning committee with an independent group, looked at the evidence provided, made a decision, and that was the end of it. I'll leave it at that, Chair. So that was the position.
There is a little bit more to that because members were thinking that the council meeting was going to be on the 28th.
Sorry, Chairman. I'm talking about the discussion we've just been having, raised by Councillor Bull and raised by Councillor Baines regarding the processes around planning committee meetings and the council. What I'm talking about is the issue was debated by council quite clearly, and the advice given by the monitoring officer at the time, based on legal advice available, was that council should not have a second bite at a planning application and shouldn't have an involvement in it. We either have a planning committee that is judicial and it takes those decisions, or we don't. We might as well then have council take all those decisions. And that, I seem to remember the debate on that very night. It's a shame it might even be recorded. We could maybe go back and look at it, Chair.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I think before members move into, you asked just a moment ago for the debate in relation to the item that you raised. Before you do, I think there is advice pending from 2 of your statutory officers, in fact, the Chief Executive and myself. So I think before members moving to that debate and hearing that advice from officers would be sensible. As members will recall, you are required to have regard to the advice. You are not required to follow the advice, but you are required to have regard to it. So in the decision-making process, I think if this comes first, then that will be most helpful in making sure this decision at least is legal.
Mr. Chairman, providing the advice that we are about to hear is pertinent to what I have raised this evening and is not appertaining to something that has happened subsequent to that decision.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, the advice that you will be given is pertinent to the issue of whether or not the meeting should be held on the 26th, which is the matter that the chairman raised in his any other business, and the matter that we're on at the moment, Councillor Cross, and it will be pertinent to that issue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'd like to start, if that's okay, Chair. When the Chairman just announced that we would have the debate about the 26th, it was highlighted that it was around the issue of attendance. What I want to just highlight is at the meeting that we held as a members briefing for those who were in attendance, including the Chair, I highlighted there were two issues that I sought your views on. And those two issues, one was about attendance and sought your views about what you would like to do and how you would like to proceed as a group of councillors. The second was about the information that we had taken that day from the DIO and Ministry of Defence about their ability to give assurance regarding a position on viability by the 26th. That doesn't affect your ability to take the report on the 26th, but my advice on the evening was that it would be hugely beneficial if the two aligned and you were taking a decision on your local plan in conjunction with the DIO providing as much assurance regarding their position of viability as possible. That's why at that meeting I suggested, and only suggested, that the meeting be moved to September and ask for your views. Obviously, I've had a meeting with the chairman on Friday and understood that there was a misunderstanding about the consultation, and I agreed with his position. And hence we agreed that we would come today and seek your views on the 26th. But I think it's important that you understand that there are two issues at hand. The first about the by-election, and in a moment I'll hand over to the monitoring officer about decisions and key decisions, particularly controversial ones within the election process, and the other about the ability of the MOD to provide you with assurance regarding the viability of the site to make your decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All members here will be familiar with the concept of PERDA and the requirements around it. I have laid out in a note that is printed and before members this evening the advice in relation to PERDA, and I will go through this here for the sake of completeness and for the record. So members will be aware that actually, as we approach election, it is usual practice for the council to go into a period of PERDA. Now, those pre-election restrictions are a parliamentary convention and are outlined in the guidance for civil servants on their role and conduct during election campaigns. There is, most helpfully, a House of Commons paper dated the 22nd of March this year that sets out the position in some longer detail than I will do this evening. However, the paper is clear that essential business must be carried on. However, there should be discretion in initiating any new action or of a continuing or long-term character. And that includes taking or announcing any major policy decisions. I've also set out for members in that paper case law in relation to the determining of planning applications in that period. What I would say to members is, and you'll see my advice set out very clearly in that paper, I hope, that local authorities are not under legal restrictions on activity in the pre-election period. However, the convention in Rutland and elsewhere is that the council acts with caution to reduce the risk of challenge that a decision has been made on party political grounds in these circumstances or on other grounds. In essence, we as council have previously not put decisions such as local plan in before members during an election period. Members, all the legal advice and the advice I have spent some time on today and looking at many other councils is that upcoming key decisions on sensitive matters should be rearranged for a date outside the pre-election period. Now, as I say, I hope the advice is clear. There are no legal restrictions on making decisions during the pre-election period. However, councils as a whole mostly follow the Cabinet Office guidance. My understanding of Rutland, and certainly my time at Rutland, is that we have followed that Cabinet Office guidance too. As a consequence of that, my advice to you is that we continue to follow that Cabinet Office guidance and do not take controversial decisions during a pre-election period. Now, should we receive notification to electors of the election, I would expect the election to be in mid-August, given the timings that we are committed to. This will put this decision extremely close from an election point of view to an election. Members, you have my advice. I'm very happy to take any questions on it.
Do we have to have the election now?
Yes, is the short answer to that. If there are two electors that notify for an election.
Well, have we sent out notification of the election?
Yes, we have, as we're required to do. The notice of vacancy was published on the Thursday, and we're required to do that. That is a returning officer function and not one for this council.
May I, Chairman? May I, Chairman? Yes, I perfectly concur that at the point of a resignation, there is a procedure to be followed. Can I just stop there for one moment? And if you will allow me, Chairman, to pick up again. The one thing I am not hearing this evening is an apology to you as the chairman of this council. Our constitution is very clear. A special meeting can only be changed with the permission and the direction of the chairman of the council. We can debate all evening, but the chairman of the council is the decision maker. Hence the traffic of emails over the weekend where the meeting was cancelled, and we don't want to go into that, and I'm not in any way trying to be difficult or witch hunting, but the meeting has been reinstated for the 26th because it is only the chairman that can change that date. And why I think we need an apology to the chairman, and if as chairman for 5 years continuous of this council, and 2 years prior to that is vice chair, and I'm sure Councillor Baines will concur. When I was contacted by Councillor Hensley, I did not have an issue with the question of will we change the meeting from a Monday to a Wednesday, was I available? Because knowing the Constitution, I knew that ultimately it would be the chairman who would make the decision this evening, last week, or whatever. But I do think we cannot allow this to happen in the future. It is undermining the status, the very important status of the chair of this council, and it is just not acceptable. I am sure if Councillor Dale had been approached to say we have an issue, may we conduct a survey with not only the Conservatives, but I assume the Liberals and the Independents were also being spoken to. I don't think there's any issue with that at all. We change meetings. The scrutiny chairs authorize the cancellation of scrutiny meetings, the bringing forward. We very often will cancel a council meeting because there is insufficient business. So I am really concerned as to how we got into this position, because whether there was a misunderstanding or not, Councillor Cross is exactly right when Councillor Baines, and he's made his statement, had a different reading on that, but it did have a big implication on that planning meeting. I will stop there. But we should record an apology to the chairman, and this must never happen again. And I would like to propose we record in the minutes, and I hope it will be unanimous, that we have an apology recorded to the chairman of this council.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. And can that be recorded? I'm taking that as unanimous.
No.
Okay, well,
Cannot take it.
that's disappointing. All right.
Let's
I
vote.
will-
Let's vote. Let's have a recorded vote. It needs 5 to have a recorded vote.
Well, I will.
Sorry, Chairman, when I say something. Yeah, I completely understand where Councillor Ball's coming from. The position of chair is a very, it's a really important position in council. However, what I would say, members, you will be aware I wasn't at that briefing because I have a teaching commitment on Wednesdays. However, I have listened to the recording, and I feel, and I say this with respect, Councillor Ball, there has been a misunderstanding of what was understood from that meeting. So to rephrase that as a minute of noting that perhaps process could have been a bit tighter, I think is reasonable. How you phrase it at the moment, I don't believe is a fair representation of what actually happened.
Okay.
And that's on the basis of me listening to the recording. I apologise for not being
Right.
at the briefing.
May I just say, and I did not intend that, it's easy to criticise, and it's very often much more difficult to do better. And that was not my intention. And if that is what members think, I apologise wholeheartedly. But I do think we should have had a greater degree of care with the approach for the start of this. And it's just a lesson to be learned for the future. And I would like to come back in a moment, if I may, on the questioning. I'd like a question of information on the possible by-election.
Councillor.
Chairman, if it helps. Thank you, Councillor Ball. On Friday, when the issue was raised, as I said, I agreed and apologised to Councillor Dale. I also put into my email an outline of why we ended up in this situation and the action that we take to do exactly what you said, which is to ensure that it doesn't happen again. We're under the understanding that officers had only acted to sort on the understanding of the position of councillors, but clearly, as Councillor Dale said, there is a process to follow post that in terms of the chairman's sign. That wasn't undertaken before the cancellation of the meeting. I've apologised to you. Hence, we're at this meeting after it got reinstated for you to have a debate on the issue outside of that members' group.
No, I fully accept that. I think in Councillor Dale, in our conversation, you were trying to make to speak on the Wednesday evening, and whatever reason with the technology, you were not able to do that. And that's, I think, members, then we have perhaps debated that.
Councillor Hartley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would just like to say I wouldn't support it because I do believe there was a genuine error, and I think the way that you had phrased it was unfortunate, as though to imply that there were it was underhand and therefore would need a direct.
I withdraw that completely. I sincerely apologise.
I would also just like to point out that with regard to that planning meeting, both myself and I do know another councillor on that planning meeting took separate legal advice, and to say that we based our decision on the wrong date of the meeting is actually very untrue as well. And again, it does not reflect the true facts of what it was. So I would also like to point that out, that I did not base my vote on that planning application on the fact a meeting had been changed. I based it on other factors and sound legal advice that I'd taken from our monitoring officer. Thank you.
Councillor Rozelle.
Chairman, thank you. Again, I listened to people talk about what happened between them. I don't hear anybody talking about those people we're here to represent, which perhaps is the most important part of this. So what I would like to say If one vote does not matter, how might that affect a ward with only one councillor? Are we now saying that Oakham South does not have the same opportunity to be represented as other wards? I sincerely hope not.
Councillor Cartman.
It's the question for the monitoring officer, Chairman. Do we know when the pre-election period might start? Do we have a date? And is the 26th in that date, or isn't it?
In very short order, as soon as we get notice from 2 electors that the election will commence, I cannot guarantee we will get that notice, but I would be extremely surprised if it wasn't in the period there. We normally get notification of that matter fairly promptly, especially in an area like Oakham. So I fully expect it to be in that period. Is my answer to you, Councillor Cartman.
Thank you. And well, this is for all members, I suppose, just a comment. Will anyone's opinion change based on possible decisions made at an extra planning meeting now scheduled for the 13th of July, which is before the 26th again? When I think the applications which were postponed last week will be coming before us, won't they?
Yes, that was a notification this afternoon.
Councillor Blanksman.
Yeah, to the monitoring officer again. You refer to PERDA, why we can't have important meetings. Yeah, today has been announced a special planning meeting on the 13th of July.
Mr. Chairman, I'm very happy to advise on that. Yes, it has, Councillor Blanksby. You'll see that in the advice I provided to you, which I do appreciate that members haven't had time to read in light of the speed with which we've delivered the item following the chairman's request, that there is the case law included in there in relation to planning committee hearings, planning committee matters in the central part of that advice.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, I'll come around.
So if this does come back to planning, will the, because I think there was 2 members of the planning committee who weren't there, myself included, will they be able to decide on it?
Mr. Chairman, again, if I may, my understanding is at present, Councillor Brown, we are dealing with whether or not the meeting on the 26th should proceed, not the matter in relation to returning into planning committee. That will be the subject of later legal advice.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to support the Chief Executive, who I was at several meetings last week where we discussed how to take forward the planning meeting, and he came out with a very measured response, as he always does give. It was a measured response which put and lay out before us the reasons for deferring the meeting to September, and I thought they were really well voiced, and it was totally there and very plausible and totally with conviction.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm rather disturbed that the planning meeting has been discussed between cabinet members and the chief executive. Now, which planning meeting do you refer?
I refer, sorry, Chair, through the chair, I refer to the date of the meeting to talk about the local plan.
My apologies, Mr. Chairman, but I'm afraid the planning meeting was noted there, and therefore that was all to do with what we have been discussing earlier. It was not to do with the council meeting, which will discuss the local plan. And furthermore, I am slightly distressed that we've possibly drifted from the problem. The problem, in my understanding, is that because the planning committee were advised that they had to come to a decision because the meeting on the 26th had been moved to the 28th. That was erroneous, and therefore the decision made was made on erroneous information, which is rather serious. All I am asking, Mr. Chairman, is that this council, the councillors, as Councillor Rozelle has referred, representing the people of Rutland who expect proper, honest discussion to take place. I expect councillors around here to hold their hands up and say, yes, a mistake was made, and therefore the decision should be referred back to the planning committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, my understanding of the item that you added to the agenda was the date of the meeting, the date of the meeting on the 26th, and whether that should be reinstated. Is that I'm checking that we're on the same item here.
On the 26th.
Yes, whether that meeting should be reinstated. Councillor Cross, I very much hear your point, and as the chairman of planning committee pointed out earlier on, I am in discussions about that matter. I do think that matter requires a further legal opinion, and is not the matter that the chairman placed on the agenda. Therefore, the matter before you this evening is whether or not the meeting on the 26th should proceed. That is the matter on which the chief exec and I are advising at this stage. In relation to your matter, I will obviously continue the dialogue with the chairman of planning committee and make sure that the legal advice that Councillor Baines pointed out earlier that we discussed is provided to him at the earliest possible opportunity in order to deal with that particular issue.
Thank you.
Councillor Rozelle.
Chair, if I may, I'll go back to my point I made about your comments earlier. This, I think, your suggestion is that we talk about something on the 26th in the absence of a ward member. I am absolutely certain that if one of the wards that had one member didn't have that member, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So my point remains the same. One vote does matter. Oakham South deserves to be represented by its councillors in the same way that a one-member ward would be. So I'm opposed to your decision, to your conversation.
No, thank you ever so much, Councillor Dale. So I think we've dealt with the process element and things going through the chair. I'm now thinking about, right, should we have a meeting on the 26th of July to discuss the local plan, or do we pause that until September? I think, having listened to obviously the monitoring officer, we need to pause that until September for 3 reasons. Election, yeah, okay, we're waiting obviously for that to be called. I should imagine, looking in my crystal ball, that will be highly likely that we will be in the pre-election period looking at the legal advice, actions with long-term character. Yep, I think the local plan's ticking that box. Major policy decisions, yep, the local plan's ticking that box. Contentious, and I appreciate in this advice it is about procurement, but I think with a 15-10 vote in February 2020, we know that there is a lot more to be said and discussed about that. Second reason, we've been told by the chief exec that there will be more information coming from the DIO. That may or may not confirm your existing view. The fact that that information is coming, you will be doing a disservice to this decision not to have that and not to have it presented in a correct format as opposed to lastminute.com, not to mention the fact that we know we have a member who does need additional reprographics to make sure that everybody would have that information in the accessible format that they need. And third, it will come as no surprise to you, because I've mentioned it all evening, future Rutland conversation. By September, we will, I believe, if I remember the timeline correctly, have at the very least a draft of a vision, a draft of what the community of Rutland hold important. All 27 of us have been very good over the few months of explaining how we might feel about a local plan and spatial strategy and where we build things. We have quoted people that we've talked to in our various walks of life. What we haven't got is 4,500 responses at our fingertips. I certainly haven't spoken to 4,500 or got 4,500 different responses or over 2,000 people. It may be members that what comes out of that vision completely supports we must not have that number of houses at St George's Barracks. It may completely support that. Equally, it may not. To try and force a decision on the 26th of July, I don't believe is the right thing to do for Rutland. Apologies if I've overstepped the mark. I've seen hands flying up with what I've said, and I do apologise.
Thank you, Jim. Well, I mean, that is good advice from Councillor Stevenson. I just wanted to go back to the planning meeting which we have scheduled, and my understanding would be that it is in order for us to have that meeting, because council business has to carry on, and planning applications should not be based on political argument. And the planning committee is supposed to be actually apolitical. So I just wanted to clarify that point, that we will be able to, hopefully, I'm sure the monitoring officer better confirm that, it's not said, be able to have the look at the two applications which were deferred from last Tuesday, because I think it's critical that we have those at the earliest opportunity. Thank you.
Councillor Begg, sorry.
Thank you. My first point, just to clarify about the planning meeting last week, I take some exception to our integrity and professionalism being questioned. We took sound advice off the monitoring officer about a number of legal issues that night. I don't believe dates of meetings was one of them, as Abby said earlier, and I didn't find that decision easy either. It's a development relatively local to myself, and I took a lot of time considering that, and I took legal advice, and I stick by the decision I made and the advice I was given by the monitoring officer at the time. So I do take exception of my professionalism and integrity being questioned. As regards to the meeting on the 26th, I do not see how anybody can see that can go ahead with such an important piece of information from the DIO not being available. That would make, in my eyes, that could make a huge difference to how I view the local plan, depending on how they come back and how they see the future of St George's. I think it's a dereliction to consider it without that information and knowing that information is available. And thirdly, I agree with you, Mark, that meeting next week is apolitical. It should happen. We have to support the residents of Whistendine and Ketton in whatever decision we come to. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McCartney, I'll come round.
Thank you, Chairman. Speaking politically, and this is to prove that my decision last week was apolitical, speaking politically, I wasn't particularly happy with the site allocation. I made that clear during the GIR scrutiny December 19, when site allocation was discussed. You all remember it. I wasn't happy with it. The decision was made at council, it stood. I accept that. But apolitically, we took a decision last week based on several things. This council in its planning decisions are on a knife edge because of the uncertainty effectively over the local plan. We don't know where we are, and that uncertainty about planning will continue. I suspect we will see more applications being lodged and brought forward to the planning committee until we make this decision. By deferring, I'm not happy with the deferring. I'm not particularly happy with the 26th either. Again, we've got a very difficult decision here, but by deferring, we are leaving ourselves open to more and more applications coming before us, where we will have to make more and more very difficult decisions again. I don't particularly relish that prospect. I think the 26th is a good idea. I've written to the chief executive and the leader about our backup plans for developments and what we have in place should this council lose a vote on the future of the emerging local plan, because we saw a little to our embarrassment, I think, in the public's eyes, what happened in the fallout of the HIF vote, which was that really there was quite a large recoil from that, and we didn't really have a position for some time. I think we need to have it clear in our minds as a council what exactly our position is in terms of what development sites we have got in the pipeline. And so that was why I wrote to the leader and the chief executive, just so that I had it clear that we did have plan B.
Councillor Tower.
Thank you. Yes, I think we've really got to focus on what is the right time to take that decision on the local plan, which is a very important decision, as we all know. We've been advised, and agree with Lucy on this, the election, it's not whether people can attend, I think as Councillor Rozelle pointed out, because at any one meeting, various councillors might not be able to attend, but it's the principle of being in a pre-election period and the whole policy underlying that. And also, can I see clarification of when exactly we'll have the information from the DIO? Because my concern is that there are risks, and we haven't heard also the risk to delaying. We're talking about a 2-month delay, but potentially what are the risks to delaying this decision, whichever way it goes. So I seek clarification on that, because I think that's important. And on the attendance thing, I think it is important that all members are represented. And is there any facility to make sure that even if it's another special meeting is called, whereby all members are able to attend? We've got a lot on the normal council agenda, so I'm just wondering if that can be taken into account as well, considering the importance of this decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baines.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. I'm going to move away from the minutiae of dates and procedures. I think perhaps not all councillors are aware that Councillor Ball and I, between us, I think have chaired this council for 7 years, not necessarily consecutively, and I led the council for 4 years. So shall we say, I speak with some degree of understanding of how not merely the formal parts of this council work, but the informal ones. I do think we can blame COVID for a lot of things. I'm not making excuses for either members or officers, but I do think we've missed that very valuable communication informally. Some people may refer to it as a conversation in the car park. I think of it more, I think it was the late Luke Costa who called it management by walking around. And it's one of the great benefits of Rutland that it is so small, we can speak to officers informally. It often helps the smooth running of this council. And I think we've got to look forward. And if you will indulge me, Chairman, for a moment, I want to make some general points which have bearing on this altogether. There is a clear distinction of responsibilities in this council. Chairman, leader, chief executive are our most important people. You remember that I spoke at the all members meeting briefing about our reaction to the Rutland Agricultural Society chaos that arose from that particular thing. And I did ask you members to desist, I think I probably said, for the lead to comment every time. We expected the chief executive to speak on behalf of the council. We expected the leader to speak if it was a political issue. The rest of us, frankly, needed to keep quiet. And, or unless we could just say we support what's being happened. Whatever you may feel, members, if you go on social media, if you talk to somebody in the street, however much you preface it with a remark, this is my personal opinion, believe me, it will be very quickly found that it's councillor so-and-so, this is what the council thinks. If you think of the chairman of the Agricultural Society, he was getting abuse, it's fair to say, because he is the current High Sheriff. The two things were in the public perception melded. We cannot afford to do that. And so what I would say is this: before annual council, this time, as members of the Conservative group know, I was not prepared for my name to be nominated in opposition to yourself, Mr. Chairman. I did that securing the knowledge that our present chairman is, like me, Rutland born and bred, and like all of you, has the interests of Rutland people at his heart. And I know that he will act in the best interests of the people of Rutland. Now, in fairness to the Chief Executive and to the monitoring officer, I think it is important to realise that they acted very swiftly as soon as they realised that due procedure was not followed. We have heard the Chief Executive, and I know that there is email traffic to that effect, that's of the apology. If you look at the Constitution, you will see that one of the duties of the chairman is to be the conscience of the council. I don't think that that function has ever been more needed than at present. For me, the structure of this council is like a tripod. The chief executive, the chairman, and the leader. I'm not a physicist, but you all know what happens when you pull one leg away from the tripod. What I think we must do is unite as a council, because I do not think we are highly regarded in the community. I'm not putting any political spin on that at all. I think we've got to re-establish ourselves as a united, sensible, debating force, representing all the different views in a civilized way. It's not a matter of wounded egos, it's a matter of those offices being duly respected, and if I may say so, Chairman, getting our full support publicly. We may have private reservations, of course we do, we have different opinions, but we really must present a united front. And whatever you decide this evening on the 26th, and I think there are valid arguments always, Chairman, it is your responsibility, and I'm sure you won't shirk on it, to decide whether or not you wish to cancel that meeting. You may well take advice from what members say this evening, but it is your prerogative. Thank you very much, Chairman. I feel very strongly on this.
Thank you, Councillor Baines.
I think
Councillor Blanksmith.
Yes, it was about deferring it to the September. For one, I won't be there if it's within a 2-week period, because I've had it already booked for a long time. And I know other people, other councillors that won't be there as well. Now, are we going to keep deferring it till we get 27 councillors?
Thank you.
That's a question, Mr. Chairman. Well, perhaps, may I then help perhaps if I can come back as I asked on PERDA, and the monitoring officer will answer this, I'm sure, very quickly. Elections are held on a Thursday, and that's going to be a Thursday. An election comes into play once papers are lodged by a candidate and checked and correct. And it's my understanding that unless there's papers lodged within the next 48 hours, i.e. before Thursday, the earliest election for a by-election will be the 26th of August. That's 6 weeks after this Thursday. My maths are right. Is it still 6 weeks notice for an election period?
35 days, Mr. Chairman, but the Councillor Ball's figures are there or thereabouts. It may be a week earlier on that.
Yeah, it could possibly be, if someone is ready to bounce tomorrow or the next day, it could be, but I think in all sense, the earliest it will be the 26th of August, and then it goes to the 2nd of September, and then the 9th of September. So I just wanted to pose that point. Now, I respect what Councillor Brazell is saying, that we should have a meeting, and it's very laudable that we should seek to have 27 members present. But in practice, members, as we know, that is not possible. So my reading this evening is that we are seeking to delay the meeting, which has already been put back from what was going to be, as my understanding is, early July until the 26th, because we didn't have the information, and predominantly because we have had a resignation and therefore there's going to be a by-election. So it is, and I think most people know this, there is a rumour within this council that there is a possible another resignation pending. So my question to the monitoring officer is, we are going to delay the meeting because we have a resignation and a by-election. We go through the motions, and perhaps even the week before either the 2nd, 9th of September or whatever, we have another resignation. What happens then, please? And also, I would have to pick up the point that Councillor Blanksby raised, because I immediately, as the Chief Executive will recall, on Wednesday, I said, oh, excuse me, Chairman, I am days away from booking a holiday in September, and I know there are other members that have also booked holidays and will not be here in certain dates. So are we going to try to fix a meeting, which I think would be nigh impossible, when all 27 members are present, and we won't have the meeting unless, or what are we going to do if there's another resignation and a by-election is called? And I have a problem with that. And also going back to, I also have an issue. The Constitution at the moment, very clearly, the only person that can make a decision this evening is the chairman. The Constitution is down to the chairman, and that's why there was email traffic over the weekend and the meeting was reinstated. But that's the Constitution. Perhaps the monitoring officer will say I'm wrong, but the Constitution is that.
Mr. Chairman, I'll seek to come back on those points and provide my advice to Councillor Wall, so that all councillors are able to make the decision. If I may, just before that, Mr. Chairman, on a point of procedure tonight, just advise that we are approaching 9:30, and so then members may wish to extend the meeting to enable this debate to be concluded.
Can I have a proposal?
I would propose
second
an extension.
Councillor Carton, Councillor Brewer, all in favour?
Can members keep their hands up, please, to enable us to just make sure. (16), Mr. Chairman, in favour.
Against?
5 against.
And abstentions?
That's 1, Mr. Chairman. And
No, I'm
sorry. Okay. Apologies, Councillor Oxley. Mr. Chairman, so that is carried that we continue until 10 o'clock, if I can assist there. In relation to the other matters, and I think Councillor Powell raised a similar point about the date of the next meeting as well. So hopefully I can sweep up both those questions at once with a suggestion. Councillor Ball, I'll come to your first question of what if there's another resignation. If there is another resignation, my advice to Purda on you will be exactly the same. And it will be wholly unenlightening, because it's likely to be in exactly the same form as it's delivered to you here. So I can only advise on the facts that I have before you presently, and so that advice remains as it stands in relation to Purda. The other matters are what they are, and you've heard the other selection of advice. In relation to the date of meeting, as you pointed out, the date of the meeting and the reason for this debate tonight, the date of the meeting is a matter for the chairman, and so I, for understandable reasons, absolutely hesitate to come back on that question without the opportunity of fully discussing that with the chairman to enable an answer to come from him on this matter. So I would not wish to prejudge the outcomes of discussion with the chairman of council on that particular point. On the final point, which is in relation to how and when decisions in relation to meetings can be made, you are wholly correct. The Constitution provides that the chairman may call a meeting, the chief executive may call a meeting, others within that sphere may have meetings called, and that is laid out in the procedure rules. Just to be absolutely clear, council can, by a vote, make a determination on that. As you know, in relation to setting standard orders aside, and as pointed out by Councillor Baines, far more eloquently than I am tonight, council is suffering on matters to do with its own business, so council can make that determination at width and over and above the chairman. So it is a matter, as the chairman asked for it to be a matter for council tonight, it is for council to determine.
If I may come back, then you've alluded in the constitution, you've alluded to the fact that perhaps it would have been, and it's not criticism, obviously the chairman might find it helpful if he had a discussion with you on the constitution. Then the constitution, if the chairman decides not to determine the meeting, yes, on the 26th this evening or not on the 26th, and it is his decision, he could go away from this meeting according to the constitution and call a special one agenda item meeting within 15 days of notification. And I think that's how the constitution reads. I have it here.
I'm sure you do, Councillor Ball, and your knowledge of the constitution has always been very, very good indeed, as you pointed out. You have an extended period in the role and you encyclopedically in that period. So
it does say that if the chairman is unable to make, feels he cannot make a decision this evening, but it does rest with him, then that does not have to happen, but the chairman could go away and within 15 days there would be another one agenda item.
What
do you want me to?
I don't know. I'm aware of the provisions. Thank you, Councillor Ball, and in fact,
I'm only trying to be helpful.
I know you are. So it's here as well. In relation to that matter, my understanding is the chairman asked for this item of business to be on council. It is for council to determine whether and when it meets in order to discuss its local plan tonight. That is the matter that's before you. That is the matter the chairman asked to be put before you. As a consequence, officers have followed that instruction. We've put it before you tonight, and so it's for council to determine that.
But I don't think it was established at the beginning that the chairman was.
Chairman, point of order. I thought there was a 5-minute rule for members to talk. And I think,
okay.
All due respect to Councillor Bull, it's probably the last
I wonder
25
how long it would be before someone brought that up.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm at the discretion of the chairman.
Councillor Rosell.
Mr. Chairman, conscious that I'm probably close to my 5 minutes as well. However, we're often told to have a care. That's what I'm doing tonight. I'm the only person here tonight from Oakham Southwold. We have 3 councillors. I'm the only one that's able to represent them tonight, although I'm certain that other board members would do the same if they were here. The whole point is, this is about choice being taken away. It isn't about a member who chooses to take a holiday or cannot be with us because of perhaps sickness absence. It is, in fact, the ward members being, the residents having the choice taken away from them to be represented. That's really dear to me. And I do wonder, if we were discussing St George's Barracks and the ward member was not there, would we have the same conversation? I doubt it.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that we've got a momentous decision coming up on the local plan, and I hope we spend as much time and energy discussing the actual decision as we have put into discussing the date of the decision. To me, I did ask a couple of questions which I think are pertinent to deciding the date. One is, when will we have the information from the DIO? Will it be available for this event? Because the worst thing that can happen is that we then defer and defer and defer. And I've forgotten my second. Point. What was the other point I asked? And the risk of deferring. To me, those are the 2 key things in making this decision. We've talked about the procedure endlessly, so can we just decide what? And I think the by-election, I think, take the advice of the monitoring officer on the principles of doing that. The attendance is a different matter, and we all obviously hope that we can be attended and represented, but that might not be the case. So can we just have clarification on those points, and then just make a decision as when is the best time to actually have the full debate on the local plan and do it justice for the residents of Rutland? Thank you.
So Councillor Park, if you recall, when I raised the issue for the first of the meeting in, we discussed that It was as a result of the DIO decision around the grants around viability. We were worried at that time that we had to go first in terms of the decision to clarify our position, whether there was support for a local plan or government would come to a decision around the grant. What we're trying to organise is a position where we get clarity from the DIO on that viability at the same time that we ask you the decision around the local plan. It is not impossible for us to ask you your position on the local plan first, and subject to viability being approved by the site. I would prefer, if possible, that we can align those two things. Can I guarantee you that the MOD, and because of their relationship with government, and it's a government decision with ministers, can provide that with you guaranteed on the date of 2nd September? I can't. There's a greater chance that equally we do have to come to a position on our local plan and understand whether it's addressed or whether it's withdrawn. In terms of risks, in terms of deferment, the current local plan, being our submitted local plan, gives us some protection in terms of it being a current policy document. At the point you withdraw it, it's no longer a policy document. So in terms of risks, the risk difference between the two, I would say, is small. There are risks to reputation depending on how the committee see both of those decisions. Whether you're making a decision prior to getting the information around viability, whether that comes forward by the time you make the decision in September. So I can't give you reassurance about which one's better, apart from we might be in a stronger position. Then you play in the issue about the election, which is why I put both issues together when asking your views on how you wanted to. Clearly, at some point soon, for the sake of our community, developers, and everyone, we need to make a decision about whether we're going to move forward or not.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to support the direction of Councillor Powell's comments. We need to make a decision on our local plan. We cannot keep on moving the dates around. But I also think we need to have the relevant information available for us to make it to the best ability. So I would suggest, not wanting to give you any suggestion on dates, Chairman, but there is a date that is pre-booked in our calendars, which is why we have it set, so that we make sure people don't book holidays for when we have important meetings like council meetings. There is an opportunity in September that we sit there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, members, for all your debate. I don't have to make a decision tonight.
Mr. Chairman, my understanding was that the matter was being placed before council this evening. You placed the matter before council's determination this evening. I think Councillor Ball was indeed pointing out that there are two mechanisms for determining this. One directly through you, and then the question Councillor Ball rose is the other through a vote of the council this evening. So you may take, if there is a proposal from the floor for something, then the council may choose to set its own business.
Mayor, Chairman, just to be correct, how do we alter the constitution?
You don't alter the constitution.
Okay, fine. We don't alter the constitution.
Chair, could I propose that we have a vote?
Second that, Chair.
Well, 13th versus the 26th. Vote on the 13th versus the 26th.
Mr. Chairman, I think a proposal is being made. My understanding from the leader is that proposal is being made for the 13th of September from the information the leader gave earlier, and you have a seconder in Councillor Rizal for that proposal.
So,
could I make a proposal that we defer it to September, but that a special meeting is called rather than have it on
Council
that date?
meeting. I'll second that.
I think on that basis there is a proposal on the table, and Councillor, and so we're aware of that. If Councillor Hemsley is and Councillor Rizal are prepared to agree to leave that to a date.
May I clarify, an apologies, member, accepting exactly what Councillor Rizal was saying, and what I think the chief exec has started at, we should defer to have a meeting in September, but we should endeavour to have the maximum number of councillors present. Because if we know certain councillors already and denoting they're on holiday, and I mentioned that on Wednesday, and I know other councillors are there, then I think we should charge, if you like, together the chairman, together with the monitoring officer and the chief exec, to determine a September date when we achieve the maximum number of councillors present, taking into holidays, whatever. And I think that is the only equitable way that we can go forward on such an important decision. I don't know whether my proposal, my second.
Yes, but we have a special council meeting, a date to be.
Just
Chair, if I may, I
Just-
trust
no, hold on,
the executive
hold on.
there to make those decisions. We don't need to advise you how to do it. I won't have the temerity to do that, but I trust you, and I'm content with that.
Mr. Chairman, if I'm clear about what's on the table now, so that all councillors understand what the vote would be on the proposal seconded. Councillor Hemsley, seconded by Councillor Rozelle, proposed the 13th. Councillor Ball, supported by Councillor Powell, made an alternate suggestion that it
That was
is.
the other way around.
Councillor Powell, sorry, I apologise, Councillor Powell. That was my slip. Councillor Powell, supported by Councillor Ball, has made the suggestion that it is for a date other than the 13th to be arranged, but ensuring that there are a maximum number of councillors that can attend.
Well, it could be the 13th if you decide that is the best day for everyone.
So the date will be left open to a date in September when the maximum number of councillors can attend. Councillor Hemsley and Councillor Rozelle have acquiesced to that proposal. Therefore, there is an alteration to that proposal. That is the proposal before you, and upon which, Mr. Chairman, you may wish to move to the vote.
My time.
It is your meeting, Mr. Chairman. It is your meeting, Council.
Just before we vote, I was upset because the meeting had been cancelled without my notification. It was the easiest thing in the world to just let it go by. Now, taking any notice, half of us wouldn't have even known that I hadn't taken, well, most of us wouldn't have known that I hadn't taken part in the decision. I wasn't thinking about myself. I didn't want to set a precedent for future chairman. If this goes by, it could be held up against a future chairman and it goes against our constitution. That is why I brought it up tonight. I think we've had a very, very good debate. Thank you all for that. The words of Oliver two years ago still ring in my head: openness and transparency. I do want us all to use the same pen, use the same headlines. You know, let's get together, let's talk, and let's know what each other's doing. It's quite simple. We're the smallest county. We want to do the best we can for our county. Let's do it. And I think the proposal now, I'm quite happy with. I had to put it back to the 26th to show my authority, which I didn't want to do, but I did think it was the right thing to do at that time. And I'm sorry we've had a big night tonight, but it was a way of making sure that everybody has their voice. And I'll put to the vote now. Is everybody in favour of the proposal?
Two. Is it two against? 21, Mr. Chair. Yes. 21.
Yeah.
Anyone
Against?
That is 2-2, Mr. Chair.
No abstentions. With that, declare the meeting closed.